Well, good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that this coffee break served as an additional recovery mechanism from last night's social evening and that it helped you. And ready for our next session. According to an ambitious United Nations target, within the next 5 years, everyone on Earth should be protected by early warning systems against increasingly extreme weather and climate change. The Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, said, "We must boost the power of prediction for everyone and build their capacity to act." On this World Meteorological Day, which was March last year, let us recognize the value of early warnings and early actions as critical tools to reduce disaster risk and support climate adaptation. As you who are following our sessions probably learned so far, there are 4 basic pillars, 4 basic elements of early warning system. One is the risk knowledge, to know what can happen where. Another one is providing monitoring and warning service that we can watch and have information what's happening. Then probably the most important thing is to disseminate this information and warning to the targeted group of citizens who are in trouble. And of course, the 4th pillar should be our capacity and capability to respond to such disasters. Today here with us, we have Vanessa Gray. She is heading Environment and Emergency Telecommunications Division, Telecommunications Development Bureau, International Telecommunications Union. And ITU is in charge for that important, probably most important pillar, number 3, about disseminating the information. So without further ado, I give floor to Ms. Gray, and please welcome her on the stage.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy also because you said it's the most important pillar, of course. Yes, we are going to be talking about the UN Early Warning for All initiative. And just maybe very briefly to say that the fact that we have this initiative is also a recognition of the fact that we are failing in terms of the climate crisis. We are not on track for our commitments. And it is now time for climate adaptation. That means we need to be better prepared for what we know is coming, an increasing number of disasters that will happen and will affect, in particular, developing countries. So I think this is very important as an introduction. My objective today is going to be a little bit to make the link between the UN Early Warning for All initiative and the discussions and the things we've been talking about here this week, and also to see what is the link and how people from this conference, the countries, but also the industry players can be involved in this initiative. First of all, just a little bit about the ITU. The ITU is the International Telecommunications Union. Some people say it is the most important UN organization that no one has ever heard of. But it is special in a number of ways. First of all, it is the oldest UN agency from 1865. And also it is special in terms of its membership. We have, as other UN organizations, our members are the 193 member states, so all countries of the world. And here it is the ministries in charge of information and communication technologies and the telecommunication regulators. Those are our clients, our members. But in addition, we also have the tech industry as our sector members, over 900 companies, but also universities and some organizations. And this includes the mobile operators, but also the Googles, the Facebook, Ericsson, Nokia, and so on, all the big tech companies in the world. And so we really have a very rich network of experts in the global ICT ecosystem. Main mandate of ITU is to help the world communicate. But I would go beyond that, because I think it's not just to make sure that we have the networks and the infrastructure, but it is also really to make sure that every person in the world benefits from the opportunities of technology. And this is, again, the link to this meeting here this week, to make sure how do more networks, more services translate into better warnings for people. So we heard about the UN initiative Early Warnings for All. By 2027, we want every person in the world to be protected by an early warning system. So the early warning system is this pillar of 4 pillars, the value circle that has been identified by the World Meteorological Organization. And just very briefly, Mladen already mentioned it a little bit. So we have the first pillar led by a UN Disaster Risk Reduction Agency that's on disaster knowledge. Do we know where the risk is, what kind of risk we're facing? The second pillar is on observation, monitoring, and forecasting, and that is led by the World Meteorological Organization. This is really understanding what hazard are we facing, when is the typhoon coming in, where is it going to hit, at what speed, and who's going to be affected or impacted. And then we get to the most important pillar, I'm quoting. This is the warning, dissemination, and communication pillar. This is the one that ITU is leading, and this is the pillar where once we know there is a disaster and we know that people have to be informed, how do we make sure that this channel is there, this last mile connectivity, that we make sure that people and communities at risk receive the information that they need? The fourth pillar is led by the IFRC, the Red Cross, and this is very much about the communities and to make sure that communities are prepared and really know how to react in the case of a disaster. This slide I wanted to include because it's, of course, every country is different, and the gaps that countries face in terms of the multi-hazard early warning systems really vary. It's never the same, but this study from an IFRC study showed that in 13 African countries, it was actually the communication and dissemination part that was missing. So maybe there was information about a hazard, about a risk, but the governments, the people were not able to receive this message. And this is really what we are working on. Very important when we talk about the multi-hazard early warning system, for us, the most important is a multi-channel approach, because this really increases the effectiveness of an alert and helps us to address the diversity of communities. For example, if there's a community that is outside a mobile network, well then mobile networks are not going to be able to help us. We need to look at sirens or other communication channels. And on the right-hand side here, we've added some of the channels: television, radio, very important, of course, cell and SMS, mobile channels, but also social media, sirens. And then I've added one, because yesterday there was a very interesting session on the increasing use of satellite networks to now be used to reach people at risk and to warn them over their mobile phones. And so I think this is still in the in the beginning phase, but this is certainly something that is going to change over the next few years and change the way we will receive communications. Also, what's really important is, of course, we need to recognize that the digital transformation is making an incredible change, and that really today this is providing new opportunities to reach more people quicker with warnings, and so this is something that we will be focusing on. Also, we always highlight the importance of the Common Alerting Protocol, CAP. We've heard a little bit about that this week, and this is an ITU standard, and this is not a communication channel, but a format to make sure that messages are sent in a coherent way over all kind of communication channels. It's also very important, and this is still part of the Pillar 3, the community involvement and trust, to make sure that warnings are co-designed by engaging the communities that they are for, and that we have specific feedback mechanisms. We've heard a lot about that actually this week. Countries, they're doing surveys. How do people react to the different warnings, and how do they perceive them? Are they clear? Are they understood? And so this is really very important also to address the structural inequalities that often are faced by women, youth, children, and others. This reflecting this very diverse community, and we need to adapt to that. The focus, what I will be focusing on now is mobile early warning systems, not because it's the only one, but because I think in terms of our initiative, it is low-hanging fruit. It is one that is in developing countries not yet sufficiently utilized, and we'll be looking at especially the opportunities of cell broadcast and location-based SMS. And this is we're focusing on this also because if you look at this chart, this is quite an impressive number that today 95% of the world's population is covered by a mobile network. And even, for example, if you look at Africa, if you take only 3 and 4G, you already have 82% of the population that is covered by mobile networks. So that means mobile networks provide a great opportunity to reach people. And just to put this into perspective, this is of course about population coverage, not geographic coverage, otherwise we wouldn't need satellites anymore, but this is where people live, but people in general can be reached over mobile networks. And this next figure I think is even more important and more telling, and this is that 3/4 of the world's population today own a mobile phone. And so this means that the mobile phone is an incredibly powerful tool to reach people because it's something we always have with us, and it is an ideal way of reaching us and alerting us. And if you look on the right-hand side, this is an acronym, the least developed countries. Those are the 47 poorest countries in the world, and even there, almost 60% of the population own a mobile phone. And before I turn to the next slide, what's important here also is that these numbers are going to go up. They will not go up very much anymore, obviously, in developed parts of the world, but in the developing countries, these numbers are just going to increase, making the mobile phone, even over time, an incredibly powerful tool. Now, in contrast to how many people can be reached and how many people own a mobile phone, here we see how few countries today are using mobile early warning systems. And again, I'm referring to cell broadcast and location-based SMS, very much in line with what the EU legislation. And here we see basically it's the developed countries in the world that are either implementing or have implemented. But in Africa, none of the countries that we are aware of are using cell broadcast or location-based SMS. And so this is one of the my key objectives through this initiative, is to make sure that today, that in a few years, we will see more countries colored on this map, and hopefully eventually all of the countries in the world. By the way, this is a map, it's work in progress. We are trying now to distinguish between cell broadcast, location-based SMS, but if you see any countries that you are aware of where they're actually using this, please let me know and we'll update. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but on cell broadcast and location-based SMS, we just know that both are very mature technologies that have been used for decades and that they have great benefits. They are generally recognized as very much complementary, and very important, they allow for geolocated warnings to your personal device. And this is probably the most important thing, they do not require pre-installed applications, and the opt-out options are limited. And this is critical because very often when we go to countries and we say, it's important to work with the mobile operators, it's important to make sure that we use mobile networks. Mobile operators have invested billions over the years to reach their customers because it's a business case, but now is the time for governments to use these networks to send alerts. And so then very often we hear, we're working on that because we're developing an app. And so I think we all know that apps are great for specific groups or use cases, but apps do not work for public warning systems at the national level. And so this is, I think, again, a very important point to make, and also highlights for us that what we need to do is increase the awareness about the possibilities of cell broadcast and location-based SMS. Many people are still not aware. The regulatory approach, you obviously all know about the legislation from 2018 in the EU to make it mandatory for all countries to reach populations over mobile networks. I use this all the time to convince other countries to say, and we have to be a little bit careful on how we formulate that, but we usually say we encourage countries to consider a regulatory approach simply because we know if you're considering or if you're looking at a regulatory approach, you will speed up the process of implementation for cell broadcast and location-based SMS or whatever, whichever you choose. Then we also, again, and this is why this week has been really exciting for me, and I've learned a lot from the industry in terms of technologies, from countries, best practices, things that work, things that don't. And so again, this is, for me, the richness of this conference is to take back the experience and to share those with the other countries that have not yet implemented these systems. And again, I've had many discussions with several people here, but hope to have more and to be able to share these experiences with the other countries. What we always do is we use sort of what is out there for the moment to promote the systems, and this is just a video. I think UK is launching on Sunday a test message on cell broadcast, so this is just a video.
You won't always be aware of dangers as they happen. That's why there's now a way to warn you when there's a danger to your life, health, or property in the area you're located. An emergency alert sends an urgent and distinctive siren-like sound to your mobile phone. It looks like this and sounds like this, appearing on your screen until you acknowledge it. If you receive an emergency alert, you should stop what you're doing, read the alert if it's safe to do so, and do what it says. Emergency alerts are trusted. They will only ever be sent by the emergency services or the government. They send the same message to all compatible phones within an area of risk, so they don't use your phone number, collect data, or track your movements. You don't need to register or download an app, and they're completely free to receive. The technology has already been used successfully in many other countries, helping to save lives from floods, acts of terrorism, and fires. In future, emergency alerts could help save lives from threats in the UK. Please make sure you keep your device software up to date so that in the unlikely event you need to receive one, you're ready to act. All emergency alerts will also be listed on gov.uk/alerts, so you can easily check that it's genuine. Emergency alerts, our way to warn you when lives are in danger.
So we see many of these now in different countries, and we use them to, again, to highlight what is this all about, how does it work, also the fact that people cannot be tracked, which is very important, but also just to show when you set up the system, it is going to be critical for governments to communicate with their populations, to make sure that people understand what this is about, how it works, and what to expect. In terms of the next step for our initiative, so what we're working on at the moment, and we have a lot of meetings with the different pillar leads and the organizations. So first of all, we're working on an implementation strategy for the next 5 years. What are the next steps we need to take to make sure that we are able to achieve this target? We also here have identified a first group of 30 countries, and these are several countries from Asia and the Pacific, Africa, Latin America, and Tajikistan, I think, from Central Asia. If you want the list, I can share it with you. So what we're going to do in these countries is really to map existing tools and resources to see what is already happening in these countries, who is active, what is the government doing, what are different organizations, what is the World Bank, UNDP, other initiatives, what's happening, and to see how we can maybe combine the resources and also identify gaps. And this is very, very important. We also want to develop a minimum capacity checklist for countries to self-assess again their gaps and priorities. So, for example, if we see that there's nothing happening in terms of warning, dissemination, and communication, this is an area that we need to look at. In terms of our own pillar, I mentioned already we're going to promote a regulatory approach adopted by the EU. We have the Global Symposium for Regulators that will take place in June, where we bring together all the heads of our regulatory agencies, and we will have this as a topic also to highlight the important role. And I know that here at this conference there were some of the regulators were also present. We work very closely with mobile network operators and the GSMA, the Association of Mobile Operators, and they are very much on board. The head of GSMA is also on the advisory board of the Early Warning for All initiative, so we have great expectations there. We discuss technologies and standards for implementation. This includes CAP, but also, of course, cell broadcast location-based SMS, highlight the differences and the advantages, shortcomings. And we also identify experts and share best practices for awareness raising. We bring on board partners and identify financing opportunities. These financing opportunities is going to be very important. And we look at existing finances and new ones. And this is, of course, going to be critical because the initiative didn't come with any actual funds, so we are currently looking for those. We also provide technical support to countries in the bidding process, and there we are currently working on a document that countries can take as a basis when they prepare a bidding for the industry. We're also working on a background paper where we explain everything that I've said here today, and mainly to raise awareness and to make sure that everyone is on the same page, and this will be published at the GSR. We're working on a video together with the Red Cross, highlighting some of the few developing countries, Philippines, Mexico, that have actually implemented cell broadcast and location-based SMS, and to show how it's used, the benefit it brings, and again, to convince more countries. We've written several blogs here for the University College London on the benefits and how the systems work and what they can bring. And probably one of the most important slides, this is where we need you. And we need you to share your good practices and lessons learned in implementing the mobile public warning system. Again, I've had many exciting discussions this week and will be following up with many of you. We would like to have your feedback in terms of the regulatory approach, also of financing. How much do the systems actually cost? If that is possible, that is very useful for us also to transmit to countries. Talk about coordination with mobile network operators, the governance structure of early warning systems. That is very important, will differ in every country, but if we can bring together different examples of how this works, I think that is going to be very useful. Again, the bidding process experience and bidding documents, if they are publicly available, when they are publicly available, this is very useful for us, and also the public communication strategy. So in general, we are really very interested in sharing data, resources, and capacity building tools. And finally, also, if very often European countries provide technical assistance to developing countries, so this is an area I would like to highlight where I think technical assistance is critical, where you can share your experience and you can support developing countries, and with that, of course, this initiative. Here are just some links and resources that I've included that we put together, again, mainly to support countries, and most important, please reach out to me if you have any ideas, or if I didn't have the opportunity to talk to you this week. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gray, for a fantastic presentation and a lot of information we've seen and collected now. And we have time for a few questions, so I'm asking the audience if there is any questions. Just please introduce yourself, and mic is coming.
Thank you. Good morning, Vincent Jeffrey from Everbridge. Thank you for the presentation, Vanessa. You provided a lot of details about Pillar 3 and how ITU is driving the initiative. Now, as we know, when it comes to communication population alerting, it's also very, very important to understand what, what the risk and danger population may be facing even before we press the button and send the alert. So can you give us more details about how the coordination is going to work between the different initiatives, the different pillars? And my question is really about number 2, 3, and 4.
Yes, and I think this is really important. This is one of the first questions we asked ourselves when we met, and actually we meet probably twice a week now to first of all, in terms of the implementation plan that I mentioned, to see how can we work together. And this is, I think, really one of the strengths of this initiative, because before there was a lot of work in silos, each pillar, but if you imagine you go into a country, you work with a Met agency, you develop a very advanced system on how to monitor alerts, but then very often there is actually not a lot of coordination then with the other stakeholders that have to be involved in making sure that this alert actually reaches those at risk. So this is something we're working on right now, and so the mapping exercise that we do, where we look at each country, who is working in each country, what exactly are the gaps, what are the needs, and how can we complement those. So I think this is where the initiative will make a big difference, especially with, I mentioned IFRC, WMO, UNDRR, but there are many other organizations, IOM, Migration, there's UNDP, there's the World Bank. So it mixes really those who provide funds, those who are operational, and those who are more in terms of the risk, this risk analysis and the risk information and data production. So that this is really, I think, a really good initiative for everyone to come together and to work on this together.
Thank you very much. Do we have more questions? Vanessa, how do you... Oh, we have a question, yep.
Hi, Michael from IT and Development Center at the Estonian Ministry of the Interior. I have a question regarding, first, the costs. We have a lot of really poor countries that are quite most likely unable to afford such solutions by themselves. Does UN plan then to help them in that regards? And secondly, there could be major security implications and the risk of using the system for political gain or any war activities in unfriendly or countries with internal wars, etc. So how we can protect that it's put into good use and not for political gain.
Thank you. In terms of the financing, I mentioned in the beginning, there's now recognition that we have to move towards climate adaptation. So I actually believe that there's going to be quite some funds available for these kinds of initiatives. Again, in the beginning, it didn't come with a pot of money, but we are looking into financing. Next week, we have a meeting with the Green Climate Fund, for example, and they're very interested in this initiative, and we're going to make a proposal. We also look at existing financing from the World Bank, for example, from the UNDP, and just to see how, in terms of these 4 pillars and the gaps that we have identified, how the funds can be used. What's very important is that the request comes from the countries. That's why one of my main objectives or my job is to convince countries how important this warning, dissemination, and communication pillar is, because they often, they can choose from different projects, and they can say this is making this a priority, and then it will be easier for us to support them. So I think longer term, the financing will be made available. The second question is very complicated and difficult to answer because, of course, if you have a public warning system, there is always a risk of misuse. And I think it's actually one of the things that makes it difficult to implement, because a lot of people, also citizens, fear this. This is either the system is overused or misused, and so I think all we can do is support in terms of best practice examples, but we have to work with the governments to install this, to set this up and implement this. So it's we need to also rely on them and just make sure that it is not misused.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. You have an open invitation to reach out to Ms. Gray with whatever questions or contributions you want to make. Just a very short question from my side for the end. How do you see that we as EENA and similar organizations can contribute and can help in this whole initiative? What would you recommend for us to do and how?
Yes, we already work very closely with EENA. For example, the map you saw on the countries that have implemented cell broadcast or location-based SMS, you have produced a lot of very useful information, I think, and we're always discussing this, other things we could look into, for example, more in terms of implementation. How do countries implement mobile early warning systems? Who is responsible? This kind of information is very important. So maybe in terms of research papers or white papers, I think that would be really good if we can look into some more opportunities here. But again, it's been already, the information that you have and this network that you have has already been incredible for us.
Thank you very much. So the success will be in cooperation of all stakeholders as it usually goes. Thanks. One applause for our presenter, please.